Bizarre Brain Comics. Oh, that was durable. Hello, my comic book friends, and welcome to Bizarre Brain Comics. I'm Gary, your host. And this is where I like to take a look at some older comics, talk a little bit about the characters and creators, and examine the stories and the art. This time I want to take a look through some of the antiquated Gold Key Star Trek comics. Yes. And Star Trek has a history in comics that has run just as long as the TV series and movies have, and it was basically through the 70s the only source of Star Trek other than the James Blish novelizations of the Star Trek episodes. Up until the Star Trek the motion picture came out, and of course, well, that started with Gold Key. They had the license for many years, and the initial issues of Star Trek, and actually all throughout the Gold Key run, there was a certain naivete of the writers involved, especially at the beginning, though, because they didn't have anything much to work with and didn't know anything about Star Trek in the first issues, so it was just basically had little to do with the kinds of stories that you would find in Star Trek. Actually, most of them had little to do with the kind of stories you would find in Star Trek. But as it progressed and the writers knew more about Star Trek, they had more Star Trek stuff, and they even began to make references to some of the events from some of the episodes, from the Star Trek episodes. Had some. And of course, various writers, and they didn't give credits, so I don't know offhand who. Some of the writers early on were beginning writers, and then later went on to become well-known writers for the other comic companies. And later on, I think George Kasdan was one of the main Star Trek writers for Gold Key. And they had the license to write up until shortly before the motion picture came out. Then Marvel got the license and did an adaptation of the movie. But we're just going to... And these are by no means all of my Gold Key Star Trek books. I just went out and grabbed a handful and put them in some rough order. So before we start looking at those books, I want to show you here. Okay, you see my character cards. You see some of those on most of my videos. And if you like any of the cards that you see here, you can get it yourself. Contact me here at my email address, and you can get it. The ones that I've already made, you can get for $15 plus $3 shipping. Or if you want a specific commission, be $18 plus $3 shipping. And it's regular comic book characters, comic strip characters, science fiction, Star Trek, Star Wars. You can see it's Star Trek stuff. And then, there we go. Throughout the run of the Gold Key Star Trek run, with just a few exceptions, they had the great painted covers. Mostly, I think, by George Wilson, it kind of looks like, but it could have been some by some others. So here we have this. This one is 15 cent. This would have been, what, 67, 68, along in there. And a little later, at the 15-cent price sticker. And the some of the earlier ones had more of a photo collage cover, but that was only for I guess the first couple of issues. Then they had the painted covers with the characters' photos up in the corner. So we had this one, Steel Sentry's Challenge, a returning space traveler and his Enterprise guests. And most of these also are, the interior art is by the great Alberto Gioliti. And I've covered this particular issue in depth, because this happens to be the very first issue of Star Trek that I ever got. And I kind of I was young, and went to town with a pen on here, and I got to scribble up here. This is probably by my dad, who had a tendency to pick up pens and scribble on any stray paper that happened to be about, to see if the pen worked, and which was often on my comic books. Kirk betrays Spock and Scotty to divert the suspicions of a space pirate. As I said, this was, and this is also my first introduction to Star Trek, because I hadn't had where I lived out in Boonies back in the 60s. At that time, there were only 3 networks, and we had one channel. And that channel was that came in halfway decent, and that station was about 70 miles away. And this is in the days of broadcast. No cable. And the channel that carried Star Trek was from over in Nebraska, about 100 miles away, and so we could get it a little bit if you held your mouth just right, and so at that time in the first run, the only episode that I saw was Amok Time. And that was barely able to see. It was so snowy, I was barely able to see it. And of course, if my dad was around, it would always be whatever show he wanted to watch. He didn't happen to not be there at that moment. Here we go. Biomagnetic tape, lifeblood of a dying planet, is hijacked. Always like this one too. This is one of my first ones, and this is a copy that I bought off the stand. One of the first ones I got. Then we went to at this time they were issued quarterly. It was a quarterly title, and then by the time the show was off the air, okay, the comic was still running here, and then of course it went up to 20 cents, and at this time they were bi-monthly. This is, in a world gone mad, Scotty and Dr. McCoy fight for their lives against each other. And it had some wild stories. I always liked this one because of the mummy cyborgs. This is still 20 cents. They got the wrong color shirt on Spock. Death grazes the Enterprise crew when 10,000-year-old mummies come to life. Must have been a Halloween episode or a Halloween issue. Then we have this one here. A planet full of doomed children playing their deadliest game. Oh, yeah. These would have been in the early 70s. Then, of course, prices jumped up. 25 cents. And this is actually a reprint of the, I covered this one in detail too. This is a reprint of the very first Star Trek comic. And this artist is, I can't remember his name, another Italian artist. And he couldn't continue to do it. That's when Alberto Gioliti took over. And then at this time, it had become monthly. And they were doing a lot of reprints. They had a lot of backlog, and so they had mostly reprints with occasional new issues thrown in. K2, Planet of Death, where cannibal plants stalk animal prey. Oh, there's another good one. Later in mid 70s, Kirk versus Kirk. A duel to save the universe from oblivion. This was a cool one, and involving the stuff about the Big Bang, and they found out that the universe was kept rerunning over and over and over again, and they sent Captain Kirk in suspended animation from the previous iteration of the universe in a capsule that survived the big crunch when the universe collapsed over billions of years, and then was restarted, and then he was to kill the Captain Kirk of this time period to change the destiny of the universe. And of course, there are all kinds of plot holes in that. But here we have one of the rare ones of just a line drawing for the cover rather than a painting, and still had Alberto Gioliti was the artist. Then here we go. This is Whitman, which is a reprint. This is the Whitman, which is still gold key, 35-cent cover price. And Al McWilliams was the artist, interior artist in this one. Oh yeah, and then we have I have several that are coverless, because if I come across them and of course they're cheap, I still get them, even though they are coverless. They need love too. And they're still quite readable. Here's a good example of the Alberto Gioliti art. And there's another one. One of our captains is missing, and this is Al McWilliams art, because he took over after Alberto Gioliti. And Al McWilliams, well, not as well known or liked nearly as much. He did a lot of Gold Key and Charlton and various others, and he did a lot of Flash Gordon comics for the comic books as well. And I think he did some Buck Rogers, but I'm not positive, as well as other stuff. And then here were another Al McWilliams one. Someone scribbled all over this first page. It says "Furlough to Fury," and that was a fun one. This one has Dr. McCoy's daughter as the main character in this particular storyline. And that's all we've got this time around for Gold Key Star Trek books. And I thought, I was into reading some of the Star Trek comics lately, and I thought, well, this would be a good opportunity just to list, just to show some of the Star Trek comics in my collection. And I want to thank you for joining me. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Please do share it with your friends who are science fiction or specifically Star Trek fans who maybe just have never read any of these Star Trek comics, because it's very nostalgic. And I love the Gold Key Star Trek comics. Get them whenever I can. And leave a comment. Who was your favorite Gold Key artist in these books, or which period of or publisher was your favorite? Gold Key, DC, Marvel? Take your pick. Let me know. I like them all. And remember, comics are art.